What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing bizarre cases of encounters with extraterrestrials, High Strangeness Part 6. I know I cover a lot of strange things here on this channel, and the topics for discussion really run the gamut, but that's because I want to know as much as I possibly can about all different types of phenomena, so that if something ever happens to me involving any realm or creature or whatever else I talk about here on this channel, I at least am more likely to know what's going on. However, sometimes I just find some incredibly bizarre, allegedly real accounts of encounters with strange beasts and creatures and all different types of aliens in general. I've covered more than a few cases of encounters with aliens that I couldn't think of any other titles for those videos other than the High Strangeness series, because that's exactly the realm in which they all seem to have taken place. Today is another one of those videos. I've got a collection here of extremely bizarre and incredibly strange encounters that I thought you all would enjoy. I've come to find that the one thing that remains guaranteed when it comes to these encounters is that absolutely nothing at all is actually guaranteed. That's why I love covering these so much. You never know what you're going to get. I know you guys will love these too, so let's jump right in. I decided to start us off with one of the most bizarre and outlandish cases I have ever come across of someone who claiming to have had encounters with extraterrestrial beings. Well, at least it's the most bizarre and outlandish for people who have claimed to have had those encounters in the desert, because this entire video are the most outlandish and bizarre I've ever seen or heard of. I found this one in a book by Timothy Beckley called Strange Effects of Flying Saucers, and it's said to have happened in the summer of 1967. The moon was shining large and brightly in the sky in some desert that's still unnamed to this day, out in California, when it happened in the early hours of the morning. It was dark outside when 18-year-old Jerry James, along with his parents and younger sister, were driving through the Badlands. They were headed from their home in Colorado to a vacation home that they kept in California. The whole family was excited to be going to Cali, and the mood in the car was upbeat and reflected that excitement. They were all having fun and getting along well, despite the fact that they had been in the car for a total of 18 hours at that point. They drove a Chevy pickup and were pulling a house trailer. They needed to stop, and so they pulled into a rest area and got out and stretched their legs. It was the last leg of their journey, and none of them could wait to get to where they were going already. Like, they just wanted to get there. As they stood there, though, the whole family seemed to notice the strange object hovering in the distance in the night sky above them. At first, they just assumed it was some sort of normal aircraft, like an airplane or helicopter or something, but they quickly realized that wasn't the case. It was somewhat spherical, the size of an average vehicle, and it resembled one of those top toys as it kept spinning around and around in the sky. I didn't know how else to explain what a top toy is. It was spinning as though it was on some sort of axis or something. It was just wandering around at first, and the family watched, but they started to absolutely panic when the craft emitted a very bright beam of light, like a giant flashlight in the sky, and it kept wandering all around the desert below it and all around them, almost as though it were searching for something, as if it were sending out some sort of searchlight and looking for something on the ground. The family could only stare at it, totally bewildered and a bit frightened for a few minutes, but once the beam trained and shined down right onto them, their fright turned to all-out terror as they wondered what in the world was going on and what was going to happen to them. The UFO actually sped through the sky in order to spin and hover directly above them, and the light was so bright the family recalled that it was as though suddenly it was broad daylight out instead of being the wee hours of the morning. The family and the craft were completely silent during the whole ordeal as they waited in fear to see what was going to happen next. Just as the family started to entertain the idea that they were possibly in for some big-time trouble, the beam of blinding light suddenly went dark as though someone had merely flipped a light switch, and the craft took off at incredible speeds into the night sky. The family was confused and really scared, rightfully so, but they had no idea that the worst, objectively, And the weirdest part of the ordeal was yet to come. The next day, the family was once again only a few miles from that same service station, and they got out at that service station once again to stretch their legs. I was wondering about this, so I looked a little more into it and I looked it up, and it turned out they hadn't continued through to California the night before and had stopped somewhere for the night, making it so that they had to pass the service station again before moving on to their vacation home. At least that's what I made of it. Right? Because they were sleeping back in the trailer. Why would they stop at that same place? I guess it was broad daylight. I don't know. I don't know if I would ever stop there again, but you know, maybe I would. If I wasn't who I was, would I stop there again? Probably not. Once again, as they stood there, they almost immediately noticed a vessel that looked like it was silver in color as it came speeding through the sky right towards them and was so close that they all said they could not only see, but probably could have counted all the little rivets on the sides and all around that craft. It was metallic, and as it hovered above the family, the mother was so terrified, she crumpled to the ground in a heap right there on the spot. She fainted. She actually had to be revived with smelling salts. I don't know if the family just carried those around. Maybe she was one of those fainters, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, she was woken up with the smelling salts, and as soon as she was up and moving again, the family decided that it would be a good idea to get into the trailer to hide and wait out whatever was happening with the craft that was still spinning and hovering above them. However, once they went to the back of the vehicle where the trailer was, they saw that a surprise was waiting for them there too. Just moments earlier, when they had initially exited it, the place had been an absolute pigsty. It was a mess. Their beds were unmade. There were dirty dishes and clothes all over the place. They had just woken up and no one had cleaned anything up yet. The entire trailer was not only spotless, but pristine, with all of the dishes done, the beds neatly and expertly made, and the whole trailer just sparkling clean. Everything was put away and in its proper place, almost like while they were all standing right there and stretching their legs out, being terrified by the craft above them, which at this point had already flown away, someone had gone inside and worked some sort of magic. Even if it had been a person who had gotten in to play some kind of joke on them or whatever the case may be, surely the family would have noticed, and also it had only been a couple of minutes that had passed. There was only one thing that was out of place, and that was a lone dish on their counter, and it had something inside of it. The family walked over to the dish and stared confusedly at what looked like a sprouting carrot. However, the carrot started to transform and move around right before their very eyes, and they all watched it do so. It sprouted roots, but the way that they moved reminded the family more of tentacles than anything else, and those tentacle roots grew quickly as the carrot, or whatever it was, fell to the ground and started writhing around. It was ever expanding and becoming tangled as it grew, causing the terrified family to keep stepping back in order to avoid becoming tripped up by or entangled in all of it. The plant, the dish it had originally sat upon, and the cabinet near it were all covered in some sort of slimy, green, goopy substance. Jerry said about it, quote, "It was a vile-smelling substance, and other than that, I can't tell you much about it. One thing was strange, though. When I touched it with a pencil, it ate up the wood and the lead in a matter of seconds," end quote. Terrifying. What if someone had poked it? Like with their finger, not a pencil. I tried to find an exact timeline and really couldn't come up with one. I don't know the exact timing of all of this, but the family did eventually get back on the road that day. They couldn't just stay there at the rest stop all day long, right, waiting for something else to happen, so they moved on. However, as he drove, the father noticed that he was no longer in control of the vehicle, and it would not only accelerate of its own accord, but it would also brake and move around all on its own. They reached another service station eventually and pulled in to get some gas. When they pulled the gas cap off, it made a noise as though it were burping, and a nasty, disgusting smell came hissing out of it. Making things even stranger was the fact that the driver's seat seemed to have melted or eroded away somehow and was barely there anymore, even though as he sat in it only seconds before, the father said it was perfectly fine. And what did they do with the carrot? They don't even explain that. Like, what happened to the carrot? Did they just toss it, leave it to someone else? Like for someone else to find so their hand or something can get eaten up? I'm serious, guys. Like, they don't have any more information about this. The ignition key glowed in the dark and had somehow become rubber-like in its malleability. The case is completely and totally baffling, but more than that, there is no more information at all, as I just said, so I assume they weren't abducted, or at least I'll assume to the best of their collective and individual knowledge, they weren't, because I looked and couldn't find anything at all about this case other than what I just told you. So my guess is it was just an odd and freakish occurrence, and the family were eventually able to move on with their lives. Somehow. Who can really know for sure, though, and it does make me wonder if it's true, then why is there nothing else online or anywhere else about it? Could it be being suppressed because it is in fact true? My money's on yes, that is more than likely what's going on here. Let's move out of the deserts of California and onto the country of Spain, where I found an account of a rather violent encounter that allegedly happened in the city of Barrios. This city has been occupied since the Bronze Age and has been the subject of many wars between Spain and Portugal. It's a very popular tourist destination for that reason, and not somewhere you would immediately think of when you think of encounters with aliens. With that being said, in 1976, it became the place where one of the most bizarre encounters with extraterrestrials has ever happened before or since in the entire country. On November 12th, 1976, at around 1:45 in the morning, two soldiers who worked at the Talavera La Real Air Base and whose names were Jose Maria Trejo and Juan Carrizosa Luan were on patrol at the area of the base where the fuel was stored and were having a fairly normal and somewhat boring night. Typically, while these two men were on duty, nothing ever happened, and they themselves admitted that the nights were always uneventful, but that night was the night when everything would change. So the two men were just walking around patrolling the area, as was their duty, when they both snapped out of whatever thoughts they had been having by a blaring noise of what sounded to them like some sort of static or other radio interference. The two men immediately thought that they were dealing with trespassers and wasted no time in looking for whoever it was. But as they searched, the sound got much louder and much more intense. It quickly transformed from a droning static to a high-pitched whistling noise, and throughout the next few minutes, it became more high-pitched and very, very much louder. After about 5 minutes of building in volume and intensity, it stopped suddenly, and there was an eerie silence that the two men were left to contemplate when it was all over. The men still weren't sure what in the world was going on, what was happening, and they continued to patrol with their weapons at the ready. They knew that something very strange was happening at the very least, and as they moved through the base with their weapons out, the sound returned suddenly and all at once to such a degree that the men were all but incapacitated by it. The sound finally stopped again, and as soon as it did, the men saw a light shining down from the sky vertically, but they described it too as being like a flash of light that lasted for about 30 seconds, and then it vanished as well. As that was happening, another guard arrived. This one had a dog with him, and he said that he had also seen and heard some pretty strange things, so he ran over to see what was going on. The men radioed the information of the events into their superiors and were ordered to do a sweep of the entire base. They searched methodically, walking parallel to a large wall that separated the main road from the base itself. Everything was quiet at first, and the dog was calm for a few minutes, but after walking several hundred yards, the sound of snapping twigs and sticks, along with what they said was a vortex of air passing near them, caused them to let the dog go so that it could investigate the area where the noises were coming from and the men could hang back a little bit. The men were watching. The dog ran off into the darkness, but quickly returned, seemingly dizzy, disoriented, and nauseous. Despite it being sick, the dog once again ran towards the same area and again came back stumbling around and unable to walk properly. It only took a moment for the dog to return to its normal self, and when it did, it circled the men in a maneuver it had been trained to do when it was alerting its handlers to an outside threat and letting them know it would be needing to protect them. It just kept circling around and around them, not letting them move anywhere. With that, the men held their weapons aimed at the darkness as they huddled close to one another and stared into the blackness expectantly, waiting for someone or something to emerge that their dog had already deemed threatening. The dog continued circling around them as a human-shaped, glowing green light appeared in the darkness where the activity seemed to be. The figure slowly walked closer to the men, and it didn't take long for them to realize that they were looking at some sort of otherworldly entity that stood at 10 feet tall or more and seemed to be composed of millions of small, light points, the brightness of which was more intense around the edges. The entity was described as wearing a helmet on its glowing green head and having freakishly long arms and legs, but no hands and feet. Mr. Trejo fainted, but before he could even hit the ground, one of the other men had opened fire on the entity. The entity seemed impervious to the 50 or more rounds the soldier pumped into it, except that it glowed brighter each time one of the bullets struck it, before it seemingly flashed incredibly brightly for a second and then vanished into thin air right before their very eyes. Immediately after the entity had vanished into the air, that same whistling noise pierced the air for about 15 seconds before it got eerily still and quiet out there again, and then the men set about helping their fallen friend. They got Trejo back to the base, and that was that for the rest of the night. The following morning, more than 50 soldiers searched the entire property of the base to try and locate the strange entity, but not only did they not find any sign of it, they went to the area where the soldier just opened fire on this thing, and they found no bullets and no casings, and upon further and closer inspection of the man who did the firing's weapon, it seemed like it hadn't ever even been discharged at all. So it was like none of it ever happened. What did the entity do? Come back with its friends and clean up? So weird. The base was obviously put on high alert for several days following the intrusion, but nothing else happened, and eventually Trejo would regain consciousness again. This took several days. When he passed out and fainted in front of that entity, he stayed out for days. However, a few days later, he lost his vision and slumped to the floor in the middle of the mess hall, seemingly for no apparent reason. He was treated and had no further episodes, but the doctors could never figure out what had been the cause of the strange illnesses in the first place. The incident would go on to be chalked up as a joint hallucination between the three men and, apparently, the dog, brought on by stress, lack of sleep, and panic, and not too long after, it was seemingly all but forgotten about. And when I said it was a violent encounter, I'm sure you guys were expecting something different, but it was a violent encounter, meaning the soldiers, in that they shot this unknown being with more than 50 rounds when it hadn't done anything except maybe accidentally make their dog a little bit sick for just a few seconds. This is why other entities, other creatures, beings, whatever you want to call them, Bigfoot, and most species of aliens do not want human beings having any sort of proof of their existence. Look what we do. Seriously, what if they would have shot it and killed it dead, or shot it and wounded it? They would have taken it and collected it, and they'd probably still be keeping it alive somehow, just experimenting on it or picking through it. We got to wise up, guys. We got to wise up. We got to brighten up and lighten up and spiritually ascend. Last, but definitely not least, is an encounter I like to call alien pancakes. It all started on the morning of April 18th, 1961, in a rural area of Wisconsin called Eagle River. On that morning, a 60-year-old chicken farmer by the name of Joe Simonton sat down on his porch to have himself some breakfast. The morning was calm and tranquil, but was about to take a turn for the highly strange, if I ever did see something take that turn. As Joe sat there slowly eating, drinking his coffee, and looking out over his chickens, the peaceful morning was shattered by a loud sound that Joe himself described as being like, quote, knobby tires on wet pavement, end quote. The noise seemed to have been coming from behind the house, and it was strange enough to him that he stopped what he was doing, he stopped eating his breakfast, and immediately got up and went to investigate it. When he did so, he saw a silver disc that was about 12 feet high and about 30 feet in diameter. It had something similar to exhaust pipes coming out of the side, and he watched as it came down out of the sky and began to hover directly over his property. A hatch opened up on the bottom of the craft, and three little men with dark skin that stood at around 5 feet tall and were all dressed identically in what looked like two-piece black suits, turtlenecks, and helmets stepped out. Joe said the strange little men were, quote, Italian looking, end quote, and were holding something that looked to him like a jug. The beings didn't hesitate at all in approaching him, and they gestured toward that little jug, and even though they didn't actually speak out loud or say anything, Joe was telepathically told that he needed to fill the jug with water for them. So he took it from them and said about it that it was, quote, a beautiful thing, a thermos jug-like bottle unlike any jug I have ever seen here on Earth, end quote. As he began filling the jug with water, the beings pulled something out of the craft that Joe described as looking like a flameless gas grill. And when he returned with the full jug, the beings looked hard at work preparing something on the grill-like object. Upon closer inspection, Joe said that the food looked something like what we call pancakes. The beings then stacked the pancakes on top of one another. Each one was about 3 inches in diameter and had little holes throughout them, and they presented the stack to Joe before saluting him, getting back into their craft. The craft then took off into the sunny morning sky at such a speed that it was, quote, gone in 2 seconds, end quote, according to the befuddled chicken farmer. He would later tell reporters, quote, if that was their food, God help them, because I took a bite of one of them and it tasted like a piece of cardboard. If that's what they lived on, no wonder they were small. When they left, I stood there in the driveway with a pile of greasy pancakes and my mouth opened, wondering what the heck I just saw. What happened? End quote. Even though Joe's story sounded too crazy to be true, other people in the area did report having seen that exact same craft, and once they came forward, it seemed like all of the United States had its eyes on this sleepy little town in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. The United States Air Force were the ones who were really focusing on the event for whatever reason, as well as the National Investigating Committee for Aerial Phenomenon. The pancakes were analyzed by the Food and Drug Laboratory of the United States Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, who came to the rather disappointing and somewhat mundane conclusion that they had been made up of hydrogenated fat, cornstarch, buckwheat hulls, soybean hulls, and wheat bran. I know that's not what anyone was expecting, but does that mean that they weren't made by aliens? Not in my opinion. Just because it was made from simple things that we have here on Earth doesn't mean aliens didn't gather those things and learn how to make a flippin' pancake, right? Let me know what you all think in the comments about that, though. Even if it doesn't disprove aliens, it doesn't prove them either. And as all of this was happening, newspapers from all over the country were mockingly reporting on the incident and making a laughing stock out of poor Joe Simonton. He stuck to his story, though, and didn't care who believed him and who didn't. In fact, the United States Air Force investigator named J. Allen Hynek came to the conclusion that at the very least, Joe believed what he was saying. Hynek said, quote, there's no question that Mr. Simonton felt that his contact had been a real experience. Simonton answered questions directly, did not contradict himself, insisted on the facts being exactly as he stated, and refused to accept embellishments or modifications. He stated he was sure that we wouldn't believe him, but that he didn't care whether he was believed. He stated simply that this happened and that was that. He appeared quite sincere to me and did not appear to be the perpetrator of a hoax, end quote. See, to me, guys, that assessment alone lends so much more credence to this encounter and is one of the main reasons why I included it here in this video. Think about it. In my opinion as well, saying in your expert opinion that someone didn't seem like they were trying to pull off a hoax or a scam is the same as saying that more than likely it's true what happened to him, right? So this guy says, in my expert opinion, he wasn't trying to fool anyone. He wasn't perpetrating a hoax. So what does that mean there, Mr. Hynek? That it was true, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching. I found some information that was hidden in the bowels of only a handful of case studies that were done on this encounter that were not included in the large majority of them. And that's that in the months that followed this encounter, Joe's chickens got sick and almost all of them died. He was absolutely sure that the encounter with the strange beings had everything to do with the death of his chickens, and he would tell a friend of his, Judge Frank W. Carter, all about it. Carter would then write, quote, Simonton informed me that 23 chickens died since April 18th and thought that maybe that may have been caused by the alleged saucer. He sells eggs to customers in town here, and the sheriff, county agricultural agent, and myself drove out from a health standpoint to see if the eggs might be affected by radiation. We took one deceased chicken to a local vet who thought the chicken might maybe be sick from food deficiency and becoming cannibals, pecking at each other where feathers drop off and kill each other. No Geiger was used, however, end quote. As far as the Air Force was concerned, the case was just simply forgotten about and not really ever mentioned again after they decided it was simply, quote, unexplained. That's all there is to that particular case, guys. And forgive me because this is going to end up being a rather short video compared to what I normally do, but I hope that it was fun nonetheless. And just for the record, I do believe in each and every one of these cases, and that's why I chose to bring them all to you here today. Guys, I just think that back in the day, and that's not to say it still doesn't happen today, but it probably does on a much smaller scale. Experiences like those I just reiterated to you guys, cases like the ones I just read off to you, seem to get swept under the rug and forgotten all about, with the media and local politicians and other people in authoritative positions trying to make a mockery out of scared and confused witnesses in order to not only shut them up, but also to make them seem like they're crazy to the rest of the world or to anyone who dares to ask more questions and believe in the encounters. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, and if you enjoyed hanging out with each other for as little a time as it was in the premiere. Please, please, please spread the love by sharing this video. Check out my shorts. I think I've been doing all right for someone who just started doing shorts, right? Am I right? Right? Please make sure your notification bell is turned on for all notifications because a lot of people haven't been getting them. On Wednesday nights, you will find myself in Ghost Dragon ZW starting at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time, where I pull one random card from a random deck for live intuitive oracle, and we usually go to like 10:30 or 11 o'clock, and I try to fit everyone in. So if that's something you're interested in, please try to get your name on the list, which all you have to do is come into the chat and say something, say whatever, and we immediately put your name on the list. If you don't want a reading, you can just say pass, but please try to do that by 10:15 at the latest Eastern Time, so that you have enough time and we can assure that you'll get read by 11 o'clock. On Thursday nights, you will either find myself, Ghost Dragon CW, and Miss Paranormal Pixie Lara doing Chillax and Chat at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, or on every other week at 8 p.m. Eastern Time as well, you will just find Miss Lara and sometimes Ghost Dragon ZW doing Conversations with Lara, the Paranormal Pixie Hour. Friday and Saturday nights at midnight, it's Ghost Dragon ZW live from the Dragon's Den. Friday nights, y'all just hang out. I don't know what you guys get up to over there, but I hear it's a really good time, and it's actually become a very popular show on the channel. So I definitely appreciate Miss Lara and Sir Ghost Dragons for doing those streams without me and bringing views in without my even having to really do anything. And on Saturday nights at midnight, Steven, Ghost Dragon ZW, has been replaying some of my old videos, commenting on them, and getting a good laugh at how weird and awkward I was. Because, I mean, I'm not weird and awkward now. I grew out of that. Luckily, I grew out of that. I mean, not awkward at all. In the description box, you will find important links, ways to donate to the channel, PayPal, Cash App, join my Patreon for $20 a month or more, and every single month automatically receive a personal 7 to 10 card intuitive oracle reading from me to you as a thank you. Also, if you want to send me a gift, Amazon wish list gift link, links to my books, Kindle and paperback versions available on Amazon. If you want an autographed signed copy, please hit me up before you make the purchase so that I can get it for you, sign it, and send it out. Yeah. For any other information, any questions, or to send in your own listener encounters, I know you guys have been asking me to get another one of those out, so I just need a couple more encounters and I can throw one of those videos together. Bing, bang, boom, no problem. Send them in. And for any and all other correspondence, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. I am always awkward at the end here, even though I should have memorized everything that I say because I say the same thing every week, but it's always choppy and awkward and broken up, and I don't remember what I'm saying halfway through a sentence. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, let me be the first one. You are beautiful. You are amazing. You are worth it. You are worthy. You can do anything you put your mind to. Blessing, abundance are your birthright as a human being. You can manifest anything that you want. Believe in the power of positive thinking and be freaking good to yourselves. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.